Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. As I promised, I'm going to start making this video series upon the request of a lot of physical therapists about how to measure the joint range of motion. That is sometimes referred to as simple goniometry. But in this video, as you can see, I'm going to introduce some basic tools that are required to measure the range of motion of any joint. Now we have to discuss a few concepts that what is range of motion and why do we need to measure it. Now the range of motion is any degree of movement available at a joint. I said the word degree. That means that we most commonly tend to measure the range of motion in degrees, and for that we use goniometers. Goniometers are these devices. As you can see, this is a universal goniometer. This is also a universal goniometer. The size is reduced. Similarly, this one and this one. These are specialized goniometers for the small joints, especially the finger. Secondly, we have these devices. These are called as inclinometer or the bubble inclinometer. Now, as you can see, they have these degrees. I'm going to tell you how to use them later on. And we have this device. It is called as a scoliometer. Then we have this measurement tape to measure the range of motion. Now, because there are a lot of conditions and in normal circumstances, we want to measure how much the joint is moving, and for that we need to measure the range of motion. The range of motion can be affected by a lot of factors, and even if someone is normal, they can have a very different or a limited range of motion, sometimes referred to as hypomobility. The range is more than normal, it is called as hypermobility, and if it is less than normal, it is called as hypomobility, and if it is normal, it is called as normomobility. Now the concept is really very simple. This is the very same reason I'm making this video, so you should have an idea about this system. So in the upcoming videos, we will be discussing only the procedures and only how to measure the range of motion. So we will not be covering the basics. So this video is going to be very important if you want to talk about the basic concepts or if you want to understand why it is used. Now, the first thing why it is used is when we want to see the progress in our patients, we want to monitor the range of motion. When we want to assess the patients for the first time, we need to have an idea about their joints and the range of motion. Now, this is not very simple, yet not very complex. Now, please try to understand that if we are going to measure the range of motion alone, sometime it's going to work, but sometime we also need to measure the muscles length through the movement of the joint. Okay. Now, the most commonly used system is 0 to 180-degree system. That is how range of motion is measured, and the placements that are most commonly used are let's talk about the parts of the goniometer. This is a universal goniometer and it has three parts. We have one arm that is continuous with the dial, and this arm is called as the fixed arm. Then we have an arm that is movable onto the dial, and it is called as the movable arm. And lastly, we have this point which is called as the pivot or the fulcrum, and this is the rivet that holds the goniometer's arm together and we can move it. Now if you look at the goniometer closely, you can see that there are these lines. They are for us to measure the range of motion easily, and you can also see that we have some measurements onto these. Here you can see we have, for example, 0 degree, 10, 20, and then it will keep on progressing all the way to 90. Now, as you can see, this line is going to coincide with the angle. So this is just a practice. You can move it to the desired angle. Similarly, the red lines or the red marks are 20, 0, 20, 40. So either you can use the red ones or you can use the black one. I prefer you use the black ones. Then we look at the smaller circles or the smaller lines in the circle. Let's see. Now you can see that. That's pretty reflective. Now it's better. Yeah. So in the goniometer, we are looking at 10 degrees of increment, 120 to 130. The smallest line is for 1 degree, and this midline is for 5 degrees, and then the big line is for 10 degrees. So 120, 21, 22, so on and so forth, all the way to 130. That is all about the parts of the goniometer. Now, the scoliometer, it has, as you can see, a ball inside that indicates us about the angle. So it is relatively easy to use. Any amount of curvature can be recorded using this scoliometer, and that is very easy. Similarly, in the bubble inclinometer, we have a dial that is of 360 degrees. So this arrowhead should be pointed to the level of the water, and as you can see there is 0. So this becomes the starting point, and as you move it, as you tilt it, the water level is going to indicate that whether you are moving in the inner circle. You can use this 10-20 degrees, or if you are using the outer circle, you can use the this movement also, like 0, 10, 20, 30, and so on and so forth. So that is relatively easy to use. And lastly, we can use a measurement tape to measure the amount of length that we will be discussing in our future videos. Now, some principles that how we can use the goniometry, or how to place the goniometer onto the patient's body. The simplest way to remember this is that the starting position for goniometry is anatomical position. Now, just try to understand this very simple concept that you are going to stabilize the fixed arm of the goniometer with the fixed body part. Let's say we take an example of elbow flexion. If we are going to perform elbow flexion, what will happen that the humerus will remain stationary and the radius and ulna are going to move into flexion. Or if we take the movement of wrist flexion, for example, as I can show you over here, my radius is fixed and my carpal bones are moving. So the fixed arm should be placed on bony landmarks of the fixed bone or the stationary bone, while the moving arm should be placed onto the moving bones. So in this example, the moving arm should be over here or over here, and the fixed arm should be over here, and then when you are going to move, you are going to measure the angle. Now, the last thing is that you need to position or point this fulcrum over the axis. So in most of the joints, there is not a fixed axis, but still for reference, you should place it onto the joint or onto the joint line or the axis as closely as possible. So we will demonstrate this in the upcoming videos. So these are all the basic concepts about the goniometry, how to place the goniometer, and what are different types of goniometers, what are different types of tools to measure the range of motion, and amongst them, goniometer is one of the easiest way. There's just one more thing that I would like to add before I finish this video, and that is, do remember that we can use the goniometer for the extremity joints very easily, and it becomes very difficult for us to measure the spinal range of motion using the goniometer. So we prefer to use two inclinometers, or sometimes referred to as two bubble inclinometers, to measure the range of motion of the spine. If we want to measure the scoliosis, we can use a scoliometer. And when we want to measure the flexibility, or when we want to measure the overall movement of the spine or the length of the spine, we can use the tape measure. But it does not give us the readings into degrees. It gives us the readings into inches or sometime into centimeter. That is not needed. So it is somehow acceptable, but it is not preferred. So for almost all the joints, I have told you that we can use either the goniometer, or we can use the inclinometer, or we can use the measurement tapes. I hope you have some questions, and I believe you are going to like this video. If you have any questions and comments or anything you like to say, please do comment on this video, and I will try my level best to answer your comments, and I will of course consider any request that you are going to make. So thank you very much, and have a good day.